Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Eunice, and here we explore the most mysterious and captivating stories from around the world. If this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. You won't want to miss what's coming next. In this video, we're uncovering a heartbreaking story about the Powell family, an American family whose lives took a dark and shocking turn. Their case became a tangled and mysterious affair that grabbed nationwide attention, and it's still unfolding in the courts today. The Powell family lived a peaceful and stable life, surrounded by calm and security. But then something terrible happened, something that shattered their world and turned their lives upside down. Keep watching the video to uncover the full story. In the heart of Akron, Ohio, the Powell family seemed to live a picture-perfect life. There was Steve, the father, Brenda, the mother, their eldest daughter Sydney, and her younger brother, four family members bound together by love and understanding. Steve and Brenda dedicated their lives to giving their children stability, comfort, and constant support, hoping to see them build a bright and successful future. But behind this calm and peaceful image, the threads of a darker story were quietly forming. A story centered on Brenda and her daughter Sydney, one that would soon take a shocking and tragic turn. Brenda Powell, in her 50s, grew up in a close-knit and loving family, an upbringing that shaped her gentle personality and her constant desire to help others. After finishing high school, she enrolled at the University of Akron, choosing to study childcare, driven by her passion for giving and supporting those in need. Following her graduation, she began working at a children's hospital in her hometown, where she quickly proved her dedication and compassion. Brenda earned the admiration of her colleagues and the trust of the many families she cared for. In her personal life, Brenda married Steve in 1995 when she was just 26 years old. Together, they began building the family she had always dreamed of, one filled with stability, love, and happiness. Sydney Powell, the eldest daughter of the Powell family, was known for her wisdom and lively spirit, always relying on her parents' support at every step she took. She shared a close and healthy bond with her mother, a relationship built on trust, love, and mutual understanding. Her academic success was a source of immense glory for her parents, who saw her as a shining example of dedication and achievement. After graduating from high school, Sydney enrolled at the University of Mount Union to continue her academic journey. But things didn't go as she had hoped. Challenges soon arose, and they would change the course of her life in ways no one could have imagined. Life in the Powell household moved along in peace and stability until the spring of 2020. That season carried with it the first winds of worry and doubt, slowly creeping into the heart of the family and reshaping the bonds that once held them together. By late February, while Steve was busy with his usual work routine, he noticed something unusual. The monthly tuition payment for Sydney's university had not been withdrawn from his bank account as it normally was. Concern started to show on his face. He tried logging into Sydney's university account to find out what was happening, but he couldn't access the information. Little by little, unease began to take root in his heart, signaling the beginning of an unexpected change in the quiet life of the Powell family. Steve's concern grew as the hours passed, so he decided to call Sydney directly to understand what was going on. Her response was calm, as she tried to reassure him that it was nothing serious, just a technical glitch in the university's system. She promised to handle it herself, to look into the details and get the issue resolved. Only a few days later, while Steve was busy at work, he received an unexpected phone call from one of Sydney's college administrators. The administrator informed him that his daughter was no longer enrolled, that she had been dismissed from a university. Shocked, Steve tried to ask for more details, but the reply was brief. "Talk to your daughter. She knows more about it." For a moment, silence overtook him. The weight of the news hit hard, and he could hardly believe what he had just heard. Never had he imagined facing a situation like this. The college's call came while Sydney was actually at home, a detail Steve discovered through the family's GPS tracking app. Without hesitation, he decided to head back right away, determined to uncover the truth behind her sudden withdrawal from school. It took Steve no more than 15 minutes to return home, where he confronted his daughter directly, demanding the truth she seemed to be hiding. Sydney explained that she had simply gone through a difficult period academically, but insisted she hadn't dropped out, as people might think. She told her father that she was still living in the campus dorms, but had reduced her course load, switching to part-time status instead. Steve couldn't hide his surprise that his daughter had kept this from him for so long, especially since he had always believed her academic life was running smoothly, just as it used to. He reminded Sydney that hiding such things from him and her mother was never the right choice. Facing problems, no matter how difficult they may be, is always better than staying silent. Steve assured her that both he and Brenda would always stand by her side, ready to support and help her through whatever challenges she faced. Immediately after his conversation with Sydney, Steve called his wife Brenda, who was finishing up her shift at the hospital and heading home. He informed her that their daughter was facing some difficulties that were affecting her studies and asked Brenda to talk to Sydney about it. Steve believed that this would help Sydney overcome her problems, given the strong bond she shared with her mother. Once the call ended, Steve left the house and headed to work. Sydney's interruption in her studies plunged her mother, Brenda, into a spiral of worry. Concerned, she decided to contact the university herself to get some answers. However, Brenda couldn't speak directly with the administrator, who was in a meeting at the time of her call. All she received was a message from a university, informing her that someone would get back to her later. Brenda arrived home weighed down by worry, and as soon as she saw Sydney, a conversation immediately sparked between them. But the calm quickly dissolved, turning into a heated argument with raised voices. In the midst of the tension, Brenda's phone rang. It was the college administrator calling. She answered the call, but her attention remained focused on the ongoing confrontation with her daughter. On the other end of the line, the administrator and his assistant could clearly hear the shouting and heated argument between mother and daughter. Suddenly, the call was cut off, leaving the college staff worried and wondering what was happening inside the Powell household. The administrator tried calling Brenda again, but the phone kept ringing with no answer. On the third attempt, someone finally picked up. It was Sydney. In a deliberately calm voice, she said, "This is Brenda. Everything is fine." But the administrator wasn't fooled. Firmly, he responded, "That's not Brenda's voice. It's you, Sydney." Seconds later, the call dropped again, leaving the situation even more mysterious and suspicious. Faced with this mystery and growing concern, the college administrator tried calling Brenda multiple times, but there was no answer. Worried by the unusual situation, he decided to contact the police to go to the Powell family home and find out what was happening. The officers obtained the address from the administrator and headed straight to the Powell residence. At 1 p.m., the police arrived at the Powell residence before Steve had returned home. Upon entering, they were met with a shocking scene. Sydney was in a hysterical state, screaming uncontrollably, her face a mix of panic and disbelief, and her clothes stained with blood. Nearby, they found Brenda lying on the floor, covered in blood. Paramedics were called immediately, and when they arrived, they found Brenda still alive, but critically injured. She was rushed to the hospital, but her heart stopped upon arrival, and she tragically passed away at the age of 50. At the same time, a specialized mental health unit took custody of Sydney, who was deeply traumatized by the horrifying scene. Once Sydney had calmed down slightly under the supervision of the mental health team, investigators began questioning her to find out what had happened. However, she didn't provide many details. She only said that she had been at home with her mother when they heard a strange noise. She added that her mother had told her to leave the house immediately, which she did. According to her account, while she was outside, an unknown person entered the home and killed her mother. Sydney added that when she returned to the house, she was confronted with a shocking sight, her mother lying on the floor, covered in blood, with a kitchen knife nearby still showing clear signs of the attack. When the police examined the Powell family home, they noticed that some of the windows were broken, adding an atmosphere of violence and chaos to the scene. As they inspected the house further, they discovered that Brenda had been struck hard on the head with a frying pan, and then had received around 30 stab wounds to her neck with a kitchen knife. What puzzled the police was the extreme nature of the violence in the crime. They wondered, why would the perpetrator stab Brenda around 30 times in the neck when the first blow with the frying pan was already enough to end her life? This behavior didn't fit the theory of a robbery or burglary, suggesting instead that the crime had other dimensions, perhaps a personal revenge or a hidden emotional motive. Moreover, the officers considered that inflicting 30 stab wounds on Brenda was excessive, especially since she had been known for a kind and friendly personality, both with her colleagues and the patients she cared for at the hospital. Therefore, it seemed highly unlikely that she had enemies who could commit such a brutal act out of hatred or revenge. The police continued to examine every corner of the house, and they found that nothing had been stolen. They also noticed blood on the broken glass, indicating that the windows had been shattered after the crime took place. As the investigation continued and the on-site examination concluded, the theory that a stranger had entered the house and committed the crime began to weaken. On the other hand, suspicion around Sydney grew, especially after the testimony of the college administrator and his assistant. Combined with her contradictory statements and confused answers, the police became convinced that she hadn't revealed everything she knew and was still hiding important details about the incident. Sydney hadn't only been hiding what happened inside the house and to her mother, she had also kept from her family the struggles and challenges she was facing at university. These personal secrets added a new dimension to understanding her actions and behavior during that period. Now let's take a closer look at Sydney's college experience. After her remarkable success and outstanding achievements in high school, Sydney's university journey wasn't as smooth. At the age of 19, she faced numerous challenges that prevented her from achieving satisfactory results. Given this difficult situation, the university officials advised her to switch to a less demanding major that would better suit her skills and abilities. However, Sydney completely refused to follow their recommendation. During her second year at university, despite her efforts and hard work, Sydney's situation worsened, and things became increasingly complicated for her. This led the university administration to inform her that she would not be able to continue her studies for the second semester of the academic year. They also told Sydney that in order to continue, she would need to switch to another program, since she had not succeeded in her current major, and they gave her a deadline to make this decision. However, Sydney refused these decisions outright, rejecting them completely. Failure was a harsh shock for Sydney, who had always been at the top. She couldn't accept the idea of stumbling, so she chose to hide the truth behind a mask of success. In front of her friends and family, she acted as if everything was going smoothly, while the reality was completely different. She even continued attending some classes and staying in the campus dorms, just to give the illusion that she was still on the path to excellence. Sydney's university troubles didn't stop there. At the end of 2019, she received shocking news, a letter from the college administration informing her of her final dismissal from the college, as well as her eviction from the campus dorms. Faced with the college's decisions, Sydney responded with a kind of forced denial, wanting to protect her reputation and image among her peers. She continued to keep the matter hidden from everyone and took several actions to maintain the illusion, including pretending she was still a student at the college, continuing to participate in various university activities, remaining in the campus dorms. Sydney took advantage of the fact that such decisions were not enforced immediately, as they were accompanied by several administrative procedures. In addition, there were deadlines for either implementing the decision or filing an appeal. As Sydney later explained, she used this period to continue attending the college as usual and to remain in the campus dorms. But in early February 2020, after the allotted time had passed, Sydney was summoned by the college administration. The college director informed her of the final decision to dismiss her, which meant she had to leave the campus dorms immediately. The director also suggested that she tell her parents about the situation, but Sydney asked him not to, giving excuses such as family problems. She realized that if her parents found out about her academic failure, it would be a huge shock for them. Faced with this situation, Sydney found no other way out but to make up an excuse for her classmates. She told them that she would leave the dorms and return to her family home, adding that she would take a temporary break from her studies. In reality, this was just a cover to justify her absence from a university, hide her big secret, and avoid any suspicious looks or embarrassment that could reveal what she was going through. Additionally, fearing that the truth might be revealed to her parents, Sydney came up with a new tactic. She began spending her nights in hotels until the spring break approached. Then she returned home, pretending to feel nostalgic, and told her parents that she preferred to stay with them rather than travel or spend the break with her university friends. Her words made the family feel proud and happy, unaware that what they heard was just a veil hiding a darker reality and the beginning of a dangerous downward spiral in their daughter's life. Sydney, who had once been the model of a successful and high-achieving high school student, now found herself lost and mentally and emotionally shattered due to all these pressures and problems. What made matters even more complicated was the bitter internal struggle she faced. How could she tell her parents the truth? She knew that confessing would shatter their hopes in her and drown them in a deep disappointment, something she never imagined she would cause. All of this happened to Sydney before she returned home, the return that witnessed the tragic assault on her mother and her death. Furthermore, everything that had happened to Sydney at university eventually came to the attention of the police. Before we continue, we'd really appreciate your support. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give this video a like. Now, let's get back to the story. As mentioned earlier, the theory that a burglar had broken into the Powell family home and committed the crime became weak and unlikely for several reasons. Sydney's contradictory and confused statements during the investigation strengthened suspicions of her involvement. The broken glass in the house was shattered from the inside, indicating that no external party had entered during the crime. The weapon used was not brought from outside. It was a kitchen knife from the family home, used to attack the mother. Suspicion increasingly turned towards Sydney as the prime suspect, especially after it was reinforced by the college administrator's testimony, which confirmed that a heated argument had occurred between Sydney and her mother. It is believed that the psychological pressure from her poor academic results and her dismissal from the college contributed to the rising tension between her and her mother. For the Powell family relatives, their first shock was Brenda's murder, and the second was the accusation and arrest of Sydney. They rejected all charges against Sydney and demanded a mental health evaluation. As for Stephen Powell, despite his shock and grief over losing his wife Brenda, he stood by his daughter Sydney and supported her. He also posted a $250,000 bail, which led to Sydney being released and tried while out on bail. After her release, Sydney stayed at her maternal grandmother's house for 2 years. During this period, her mental health was closely monitored by several psychological specialists. In 2022, when Sydney turned 21, her trial officially began. Sydney defended herself, claiming she was not guilty due to her mental and psychological disorders. However, the prosecutor argued that Sydney was not insane and was merely pretending to have a mental illness, adding that she fully knew what she was doing. The prosecutor supported his argument by stating that Sydney had previously tried to cover up her crime by breaking the window glass in order to make others believe that an unknown third party was responsible for Brenda's murder. According to him, this clearly indicated that Sydney was fully aware that what she did was wrong. In the same context, the prosecutor added that during the events, her father called her before returning home, asking what was going on. Sydney calmly reassured him that everything was fine. When he asked to speak with Brenda, she told him that her mother was busy talking with the college administrator. In reality, she had just finished attacking her mother, the prosecutor claimed. According to the prosecutor, during that call, Sydney realized that the police were on their way to the house. She then tried to hide the evidence of the crime she had committed by breaking the window glass so that everyone would believe, as previously mentioned, that someone else had entered the house and committed the murder. The prosecutor argued that Sydney's repeated utterance of the phrase, "get out of the house," when she was taken to the hospital was an attempt to pretend she had been shocked by an intruder. He reminded everyone of the autopsy results for Brenda, which showed that Sydney knew exactly what she was doing. All the blows and stabs were precise, indicating, in the prosecutor's view, a deliberate intent to kill. In addition, the knife wounds on Brenda's hands proved that she had tried to defend herself against her daughter. The prosecutor added that lying, hiding the truth, and trying to frame someone else are all signs that a person understands their actions are wrong. In other words, he can clearly distinguish right from wrong, and therefore he are responsible for their actions. For Sydney's defense, several experts were brought in to discuss her mental and psychological health. They pointed out that 3 psychologists confirmed that Sydney was suffering from a form of schizophrenia. They also noted that she had experienced a severe episode of mental disturbance, essentially losing all ability to perceive and distinguish right from wrong, on the day of the incident. The psychologist who had been monitoring Sydney since the crime stated that she had gone through a severe psychotic episode which indicated her struggle with schizophrenia. He also mentioned that Sydney had suffered several concussions from playing sports, which further worsened her mental health. Additionally, she had been experiencing hallucinations shortly before the crime. As for Sydney herself, she claimed that she did not remember the attack. All she recalled was sitting on the couch with her mother and later being at the hospital after the incident. On the other hand, mental health experts added that the early signs of Sydney's condition appeared during her high school years based on the testimony of one of her teachers. The teacher stated that, specifically during Sydney's final year in one class, she was calm at first but suddenly broke into a hysterical crying fit, showing signs of panic and fear. He explained that Sydney suddenly could no longer see numbers. This occurred just before she was about to take a test. As for Sydney's lawyers, they argued that their client could not handle the pressures of college life, which worsened her mental and psychological condition. They maintained that the crime was committed while Sydney was in a state of hysteria and unconsciousness. At the conclusion of the trial, the prosecutor emphasized in his final argument that Sydney was fully aware of her actions on the day of the crime. He stated that she knew the gravity of what she was doing, which explained her attempts to hide the evidence and mislead the police. He added that neither stress nor hallucinations influenced her behavior. The prosecutor also noted that, under United States law, anyone who can distinguish right from wrong is criminally responsible for their actions, and Sydney was clearly able to do so during the crime. On the other hand, Stephen Powell insisted that his daughter did not need a trial or punishment, but treatment. He added that his late wife Brenda would never have wanted her daughter to go to prison. After 3 days of deliberation, on September 20th, 2023, the jury found Sydney guilty of murder, criminal assault, and attempting to tamper with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years as a preliminary verdict. The jury concluded that Sydney was fully aware of her actions during the crime and was not under the influence of hallucinations, schizophrenia, or any other mental disorder. The case did not end there. Sydney's defense team appealed the verdict, and in December 2024, the appellate court overturned the original ruling and ordered a retrial. The court justified this decision by noting that the defense had been denied the right to present a rebuttal after the prosecution expert's testimony, which was considered a violation of Sydney's right to a fair trial. This decision was opposed by the prosecution, who appealed to the Ohio Supreme Court, while the defense also rejected it, continuing to demand Sydney's acquittal and the dismissal of all charges against her. As of now, the case is still under review by the Ohio Supreme Court, and no date has been set for the appeal hearing. This appeal could either uphold the appellate court's ruling or overturn it, leading to a retrial, while Sydney remains in custody. What do you think about the story and the case that stemmed from it? Was the initial verdict against Sydney fair or unjust? Do you think Sydney deserves prison time, or should she receive psychological and psychiatric treatment instead? Share your opinions in the comments below. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to support us. We'll see you in the next video with a new story.